Alrighty, this is a YouTube video. We're back again with another YouTube video. We're going to talk about software development. I noticed in the last video I talked very quickly and I mumbled a lot of my words, which my family members tend to reiterate to me. So I'm going to try and speak more slowly, more comprehensibly. I don't think, is that the right word? Comprehensible. Incomprehensible. So incomprehensible, I'm going to talk to you in a more comprehensible way. Today I wanted to talk about my experience developing software on Mac versus Windows. I want to talk about my experience developing software, first of all, in an educational setting. How I developed software, you know, my experience developing software on Mac versus Windows during university, and my experiencing developing software for work on Mac versus Windows. And I want to start off by saying it doesn't matter, disclaimer, for most contexts. No, sorry, it only depends on the context whether or not developing software on Mac versus Windows matters. What matters is the software works, and what matters is that your software works in the target environment. That's what matters. The context matters. Mac versus Windows is a fairly arbitrary argument, and I tend not to get into them because they're for super nerds or people who are uninformed. I'm joking. People can talk about what they want. But what we're going to talk about is, you know, the differences in developing software on Mac versus Windows. And I'm going to start off talking a little bit about my experience learning software. So I, for a very long time, have been a Mac OS user. That's the computer I've had at home since a very young age. I think I got my first Macintosh computer when I was, I want to say 14, and I wasn't doing very important stuff on it. I was mostly playing World of Warcraft, and then eventually used it to make music on Logic X. That was my experience before programming, and my programming journey begun in about 2016, I want to say. Yeah, in about 2016 is where I started programming semi-seriously, and in 2017 I begun my university degree in computer science. So what I noticed, well, I'll first say that I only had the opportunity to make this comparison once I stepped into the classroom in university, because I didn't keep Windows operating system either on my Macintosh machine versus Macintosh machine. I didn't have a dual boot. There wasn't a way for me to, you know, test both of those environments whilst I was programming. But when I stepped into the lab, there was some programs that I didn't have access to, namely Visual Studio Code. So it was only once I started using those computers did I get an opportunity to have an opinion on how I went about developing software. Most of the examples that I developed, the toy examples, the kind of automated marking system programs that we would try and build, it was mostly obviously toy work, so it wasn't that important, and it was mostly in a quite constrained environment. So we would be building algorithms that would spit out some console log, and that would be the final product of the software. So there wasn't really too much need for linking things together and having our program perform any meaningful input and output aside from reading files and writing files. Not that that's not important, but again, these were just toy examples. So it was only until I got some experience in needing to build software with outside libraries and installing certain packages on my machine to develop software where I noticed the differences between the two. What I really enjoyed about Mac, and this is beginning to lean into the professional setting, but this is still in kind of like the experimental context of learning software development at home and during uni. When I wanted to install packages, I found with Macintosh it was a lot easier, mostly because of Homebrew and how easy that made to install software packages. And if you don't know what Homebrew is a utility for installing software dependencies and software tools and libraries that you might use in development. I'm trying to think of an example of something that I've recently downloaded, installed with Homebrew. So I believe MariaDB, which is a database server rather, is a piece of software that I have installed using Homebrew. And most of the time, installing software libraries using Homebrew is one command, and under the hood, it installs all of the necessary dependencies. And if it's previously installed, it will update some of the dependencies and kind of manage all of those kind of peripheral software. So I found that really useful about using Mac, as opposed to Windows, where, especially when I was learning, I didn't fully understand like the directory structure, which is something, you know, in retrospect would have been good to have pushed myself to learn that. But software development is complex at times, and just learning one piece at a time is an approach that works for me. So I found using Homebrew meant that I could skip over some of the complex library management things that I needed to learn the task or perform the task at hand. So I found that really useful on Mac. Now, that's just one example in education. Outside of education, when I started my job as a software developer, I use Windows. To this day, I use Windows, and I really enjoy it. An intern was talking to me a couple of days ago about this, and I told him that one of the things I really enjoyed about using two separate operating systems is I like the context switch. I like, you know, when I go to work, I'm working in a Windows operating system, and that sort of puts me in the headspace of I'm at work now. And then when I get home and I use my Mac, it kind of relaxes me a little bit, and I kind of switch in the headspace of okay, this is now my work, and I approach that differently to how I would approach working at my office. So in terms of like luxuries that come with Windows, there's certain things which are a little bit easier. I sometimes find navigating directories a little bit easier in Windows, because of course you have the path right in the File Explorer window. I still feel like such a noob actually talking about this, because it seems like I'm not as familiar with it as compared to Mac. I don't use a Windows shell that often, which is essentially the terminal for Windows, except for SSHing into virtual machines. But I do find that it's not too bad once I got used to it. It was a bit frustrating at first getting used to all of the commands, but once I understood that, it was all okay. So in summary, it doesn't matter what you use. What matters is the environment in which your software is targeting, and that doesn't create bugs. So thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.